Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Just Ask Julia. My name is actually Liz Helton, and I will be your tour guide for today's presentation. Today, we are talking about advancing your career and asking for promotion and raise. Now, if you're watching us live today, you'll know that we are going to cover about a half hour of content, and then we're going to dive into some questions, open forum style. Those of you that are watching the replay, you're going to see our content today, but if you're curious or you have questions, feel free to leave a comment or make sure to jump into a future Just Ask Julia session where you can learn more from us on any number of career development related topics. And you can find that link in the description below. So diving into today's topic. So advancing your career and asking for promotion is or raise is such an important topic because so often professionals get into a role and then kind of just go with the flow, kind of hitchhike our way through our careers a little bit and kind of sleep on opportunities or abilities to advance, advocate, and go on kind of the offense for their own careers. And so what we're going to talk about today are some strategies that you can tap into when you are starting to feel that itch of, am I getting the most out of this role? Am I being compensated in the way I deserve? Or can I be reaching for more and doing more when I'm hoping to do kind of a little bit more than what I'm currently doing? So first and foremost, I always like to start with a little bit of some statistics to kind of back up a little bit of what we're talking about. Today's metrics come from a pay scale survey of 30,000 workers that was published in the Atlantic earlier this year. And it talks about the dynamics of asking for a raise. Now, I wish I had some similar statistics for promotion, but they are pretty comparable from what we see. So the study specifically does talk about raises, but in today's conversation, we are going to be talking about raise and promotion. So first and foremost, the study did find that 43% of professionals that were surveyed asked for a raise within the last year. Now, only 44% of them got what they wanted. Of the remaining percent, only 25% received no raise at all. Now, why are professionals asking or not asking? Some of the reasons kind of outline in that 57% didn't ask at all. 38% of those asked for raises or got raises without even asking. And then 28% of the participants surveyed felt uncomfortable asking, right? Which is a pretty big number for when you feel that urge to be asking for more compensation, to not feel like you can actually advocate for yourself. Now, keep in mind, this is a pay scale survey, and pay scale is a site that you can go and look up compensation. So 30,000 workers that were surveyed from pay scale, that these numbers are going to be from a pool of individuals that are going to the pay scale site. So keep that metric in mind, that these are people who are actively pursuing information about compensation by going to their site and completing that survey. Now, within the income sectors, one of the interesting things we found about this is that lower income earners, those that earn less than $40,000 to $60,000 a year, are the least likely to be asking for a raise. Those that earn more than 100,000 are the most likely. And I think it peaked at individuals that were earning $153,000 a year are the most likely to be asking for raises. So those individuals between kind of 40 and 100, it was really stagnant. There wasn't a lot of shift one way or the other. It was a pretty even split around whether they were asking or not. So you kind of see the lowest on the lower end of the pay scale and the highest on the high end of the pay scale. Now, one of the things that people ask about a lot are the gender differences when asking for additional compensation. And what the study found was that there was no significant gender gap overall in whether they were asking for additional compensation or not. However, of the MBA grads that had asked for compensation, 63% of males asked and 48% of females asked. Now, of those females that did ask, 21% saw a denial rate. And of the males, only 10% saw a denial rate of asking and then not receiving. So there was a bit of a gap when it came to whether they were actually receiving that additional compensation. Now, there could be lots of reasons for that. Historically speaking, women tend to not be as skilled negotiators historically, and men typically are a little bit more confident in their ability to negotiate and advocate for themselves. So, ladies, we got some work to do. All right. So why is it that we struggle to advocate for ourselves or to be a voice for ourselves? One of the most important things that I had a mentor ever say to me is that nobody is going to advocate for yourself more than you will. Whether you have the best boss in the world that wants you to earn what you are valued at and wants you to succeed and grow in your career, you have a partner that is a champion for you. Nobody in your life, friends, family, colleagues, um, subordinates, bosses, nobody is going to advocate for yourself and the things that are most aligned for your career the way that you can. So some of the roadblocks that professionals face when they are trying to advocate for themselves is what's going on internally. So if you find yourself saying, gosh, nobody sees me and the value that I bring, and you feel that sense of not being able to really showcase the value, or that you're being seen within the workplace, or that you're constantly having to prove yourself or fight for yourself and it feels like a constant uphill battle, or that you're actually competing with your peers. These are all terms that are really um, ag- aggressive, right? That these are saying that you're having to put up roadblocks, right? That you have to be aggressive to be heard or seen, or that you have to be somebody that you don't like, that isn't authentic to you in order to get what you want. That advocating for yourself is something that is inherently not you. Well, that sounds like it's time to change the tune. So, the first step when you decide that it is time to be advocating for yourself in some way is to be changing your inner dialogue, right? Because so many times our inner dialogue, those little voices that form the anxiety in our brains, are going to be the things that hold us back. Now, how do we shift these around? Well, let's try reframing it with things like, I have proof of what I have contributed, and I'm going to give you some exact tools to help you keep track of what you've contributed so that if you don't have that proof right now, you're going to be able to start gathering it. Instead of thinking about it as competition, or that you have to be somebody that is not who is authentic to you, try framing it with, when I advocate for myself, I make sure that I am seen, right? You're no longer saying, gosh, I feel like I have to just fight to be seen. When you advocate for yourself, I make sure that I am seen. And instead of it being a competition, try reframing it with, when I advocate for myself, I open doors that help other people advocate for themselves too, creating a work culture where it is acceptable to be having these dialogues about performance on an ongoing basis. The more I advocate for myself, the more I become comfortable with it. Guys, we have to be kind of crappy at something in order to be good with it. I promise you that the first time that you go out and try advocating for yourself, or the first time that you did in the past, it probably felt really uncomfortable, and it probably, maybe it went well, but it probably felt very unnatural. Just like with networking, just like with job searching or any other aspect of your career, advocating for yourself is the same way. You got to kind of go through the motions to become really great at it. And then finally, I will commit to being myself and will be proud of how I showed up. You don't have to sacrifice your moral compass in order to stand up for what you know you have done in the past. So, reframing those doubts, anytime those little creepy voices of doubt pop into your head, try reframing it with a do statement, right? So the don't statements, the negative statements, try and shift that around to be more forward looking and outcome focused, right? What is the benefit of going to bat for yourself? Now, how do we do that, right? It's great to have this inner dialogue that turns positive, but without the tools, that's going to feel near impossible. So, in order to start advocating it for yourself, you need to, one, first and foremost, know yourself. You need to be able to prepare and to share. You're not going to just have this off the top of your head. And then finally, to prioritize your goals, right? So when we dive into knowing ourselves, we we focus on what are your strengths? What do you know that you are inherently a rock star at? And I hear this all the time when I'm working with clients that are working with me on their resumes. They say, "Liz, I just go in and just do my job. I don't I it's not that it's not a superpower." And I have to pause and I say, "Wait a minute. If you don't feel like something is your superpower, that means it comes naturally to you. I can almost promise you that that doesn't come naturally to everybody else. So thinking about those things that just feel natural, that you walk into a room and you know, this is what I can do. This is what I am known for. That is something really important to take ownership of and can help you recognize what your personal brand is. On the flip side of that, it's equally important to know what you maybe avoid or procrastinate or would happily delegate to somebody else. Just like knowing your strengths, we need to know what those things are that don't come as naturally to you, because these are all going to be things that the person sitting on the other side of that desk is also going to start recognizing, right? You also want to recognize the people around you that you can lean on, that you also seek as partners or running mates. Who in your workspace do you know that you jive well with, that you can bounce things off of, that balances out those strengths and challenges that you might have. This is really important in a work atmosphere because this is how you can create more of a cohesive work environment, right? Secondly, you want to be able to be prepared and rehearsed in how you are sharing and knowing your stories. I like to think of knowing your stories as knowing what your anchor points are. So if you're going in to ask for a promotion or a raise and saying, this is why I think I deserve this, you need to know, well, what examples can you give, right? And then what are the biggest things in each of those examples that you're going to pull from? And I call these anchor points because within any anchor point story, you should be able to pull your accomplishments, your biggest learning moments, right? So how did you, in those accomplishments, how did you leverage your strengths in those learning moments? How did you work through those challenges and become a better professional as a result? And then really knowing that value and impact. What was the end result toward the bottom line of the business? Knowing what the focuses of the organization as a whole is going to help you be able to advocate for yourself in the right direction by saying, I know that our goal for this year was to meet X, Y, and Z, and this is how I accomplished that. And to be able to tell those stories is going to help you move the needle a little bit further down the road. Now, you also want to really go in knowing what your personal goals are. Like I said at the top of this session today, you're the only one that can advocate for yourself in alignment with your goals to the degree that you can. So, prioritizing your goals and knowing what you're walking into any room with the hope of getting out of it is going to be important, whether that's money, title, recognition, or responsibility. Maybe it's that you're trying to advocate for yourself for more mentorship and support and the opportunity to learn and grow. Knowing what those goals are is really, really important. Okay. All right. So how do we keep track of this? Now, as the resident resume writer for Holy and Associates, I always like to throw a little bit of content in here about your resume, but this isn't in the form of a job search. One of the things that we talk about in our resume practice is writing your resume shouldn't start with when you are ready to look for a job. It should be something that you keep up to date on an ongoing basis, because your resume gets to be where you showcase all of your greatest accomplishments. And then when you're in a job search, you start aligning them for a role that you're targeting. But in the meantime, setting yourself up for success and being able to keep track of the things that you have done, to keep track of a brag book, if you will, for yourself. Keeping notes and documentations to showcase those accomplishments. Maybe you've just wrapped up a project and you've sent off the final results of the project to your director. And, as a result, put that in a folder, save it, save that email that showcases what the accomplishment is so that you can tackle it later and, put it into a great bullet point for your resume. You don't need to rewrite your resume with every project, but keeping track of what you have done, the milestones, what you've learned is going to help you both advocate for yourself now and then down the road, should you find yourself in the midst of a job search. raising your hand for opportunities. So if you are just going through the motions, right, and just checking off the boxes in that job description for your current role, that's not necessarily going to set you up for success down the road. So raising your hand for opportunities that are in alignment with the direction you want to be taking your career is going to help individuals to see you as that person before the conversation even gets brought to the table. As we talked about earlier, advocating for others, a rising tide lifts all ships. So when you see others doing something that is setting themselves up for success, thanking and acknowledging and advocating for others will also help um, others see you as someone who can be relied on and that can be confided in, right? The most respected leaders are champions for other people. As I said, rising tide lifts all ships. Inform and remind, right? So just like you're the only one that can advocate for yourself, you're the only person who puts a full-time spotlight on the things that you're doing. Whereas your manager or your boss might, what you're doing is just a drop in the bucket of the things that are in their scope of reference. So make an assumption that your manager isn't keeping those same tabs on all of the things you've done throughout the year, right? So making sure to showcase and all of the documentation you had, really take the time to celebrate when things go right. um, Knowing your worth. What could you earn if you were somewhere else? Pay scale, as I mentioned, top of session, as well as Glassdoor, salary.com. These are great places to kind of keep a pulse on what is the compensation rate for your equivalent role somewhere else. And then also thinking about what would it cost your company to replace you? I think this number for sure has gone up, but the last number I read is that on average, it will cost $100,000 to onboard a new employee, to train them up, to get them onboarded. The gap in time and of what they are able to do as they are learning, it costs a lot to ramp somebody up, right? What is the value you bring by just being cemented in your job, right? And what would the company lose if you were to leave, right? What would it take for them to replace you and to bring somebody else on? But also, what is that special thing that you bring to the table that they would have to work really hard to find somebody else that could fill, or find multiple people that could fill that spot? And lastly, knowing that confidence is key. It's the belief in what you are saying or asking that is essential to your success. If you walk into a room and say, well, I really think I'm ready to take on this. I think I'm ready to take on this position. And come in about it in a meek way, that is going to be seen with probably not the result you are hoping for. And I've got a couple scripts here that are going to help you figure out exactly how to set up that language and start those conversations. All right. So here's where the magic really happens. Here's some ways that we can really start to advocate for ourselves. So in the case of asking for a raise, you might come back and say, I appreciate the increase. Thank you for going to bat with me, but I was hoping for a more substantial raise because. And then what you want to do, leave it open-ended. Give those examples of what is it, go back to those anchor point stories. What is it that you've accomplished? What have you saved? What have you brought in over the course of the year? What systems did you put into place that have helped make the company run operationally? And then wrap it with an open-ended question of what can we do to make that happen? The open-ended question sets the stage for what comes next on the other side of the table, right? It prevents them from saying yes or no, and it keeps the dialogue going, right? So let's take another scenario and how maybe it's that you are, really excited to be learning and doing more of what what you're currently doing in your role, but you also want to start priming yourself for something more. The conversation might look like, I've learned so much in this job, and that's really important to me. I need to be constantly learning and taking on new challenges. I want to get experience with X, Y, and Z. How can you help me do that? Right. Again, that open-ended question is going to set the stage for more dialogue. How can you help me get exposure to these types of learning experiences? Okay, so on the flip side of that, maybe there's something on your list that you absolutely would love to delegate out and you do not want in your job description anymore. So the conversation can look like, one of my responsibilities is to blank. And to be honest, I don't like doing it and find myself putting it off until it's done. I'm sure you felt this way in your career, and quite frankly, I know that there's somebody else that might be able to take this on and do a better job at it. So in this case, what we want to do next is to offer a suggestion. Is there somebody else who is good at it or likes doing it? Is there a pathway to being able to find a way to not have this thing that is kind of a roadblock for you in your career and for the company to be able to take that on, right? Um, Maybe there's just something missing for you. Okay. So one thing that's missing for me is blank. Maybe it's that you want more exposure to the work with clients. Maybe it's that you are ready to be working and having more strategic conversations. I need blank to feel that I am learning and growing. And then follow this up with, I'd like to brainstorm with you about ways that I can add into my job or get more out of the experience in this area, right? So the biggest thing to keep in mind is that you want to keep the conversation positive. You want to be having a open dialogue where you are not giving the opportunity for somebody to just say yes or no. It's about having an open-ended question where you can keep a conversation going. Now, even with an open-ended question, you still might not get the answer that you're looking for. We get this a lot, especially with raises. We just don't have that in our budget right now. Okay, well, how do we combat that, right? How do we keep that conversation going? Well, you can say something to the effect of, I understand the budget constraints. I know the value that I bring, and that when there's a will, there's a way. Let's talk about what we can do. So, and with this, you want to think about the fact that, okay, there's not just okay, we can go up to this number right now. Maybe it's okay, well, what can we add now, but maybe when can we have this conversation again? Right? Like when is an appropriate time to have this conversation again? Get it on the calendar, right? So always be keeping the conversation going. Another one is, okay, I just don't think you're ready. I don't think you're ready for that promotion. We're not there yet. Yeah, ow, right? Because you see yourself in one way and then the person sitting across from you doesn't see you in that way. So how do we combat that? Well, I feel like my success with blank has positioned me with success. This goes back to those anchor points. I feel like those experiences I had with X, Y, and Z anchor points has positioned me to be successful with this too. Tell me why you see this differently. And then what that opens the door to is to set some new goals for you. All right, well, then that's going to start giving you some new insight into the way you're being seen and what you can be working on to be ready for that next position, right? And so that the next time you have this conversation, you can say, hey, I know the last time we talked about this, you wanted me to work on X, Y, and Z. Here's how I've done that. Now let's talk. All right. What about if it's just not possible or that it's an inappropriate request? Okay, so having the understanding of what the business has going on is going to be really important here. I understand that this will impact X, Y, and Z. I understand that taking me off of this project or taking me off of this responsibility will have an impact, but I think it's a good business case. There's a good business case for it because I know that if I am taking less time to do some of this type of work, I'm going to have more ability to be taking on revenue generating opportunities, as an example. Can we talk about that? Right? What is it that if you're going to cause an impact in some way, how is that going to actually serve the business well? Right? And know those things ahead of time. All right. Well, here's the one we often hear, and I think I've heard at least 3 people in the last month tell me that they have heard people tell them, "Well, we just can't afford you to lose you on our team. You're just too good at what you're currently doing." Thank you for acknowledging that I make a difference. I'm so glad to hear that the work we're doing is having a solid impact on the company. I really want this team to succeed, but I also need to put my career first and want to grow in my career. Let's talk about how I can grow personally and also make sure that the team is set up for success. What does the roadmap look like? How can I help the team succeed and still be able to feel satisfied in my career? Right? Acknowledging that like you get it. You're a rock star, right? But also that there's, there's some give and take there, right? Like there's a way for you to be able to move the team forward and be able to take on work that is going to be more fulfilling for yourself down the road. Okay. Don't go into these conversations cold. You've got to practice, practice, practice. Because if you walk in, even having rehearsed it just in your brain, you're going to feel like, oh, I got this. And then you sit down and the questions start coming and it can feel awkward and clunky and it will come across that way if you don't rehearse. So first and foremost, record yourself. Phone, Zoom, Loom, whatever, but you want to be able to see, okay, how is this actually coming across? Um, and from the other person's point of view. So being able to see yourself do it is going to help. Have a partner that you can work with on this. Take a loved one, a friend, family member, trusted colleague, that can have these practice conversations with you and to be able to bounce ideas off of. Knowing your body language is going to be a really big part of this. This is all very similar to prepping for an interview, right? These are all the same things that we would advise people to do when they are going in to land the job in the first place. You want to present yourself as rehearsed and ready for those conversations to showcase that confidence so that you sound comfortable with your own words. And most importantly, don't memorize. It is very clear when somebody has memorized a script and they have gone through and or if you're on Zoom, like literally reading through something, we call them anchor points so that you can know these stories inside and out, backwards and forwards, so that no matter what question is posed of you, you can pull from these stories and pull from these metrics and your wins and the challenges that you have faced and just really know at heart what these projects were about so that you can, get your point across without having to refer to your notes or a script that you have rehearsed and given over and over again. Because at the end of the day, you don't know what form the conversation is going to take. You just need to know what your key points are throughout the conversation. All right. Well, that is going to do it for us today. Again, my name is Liz. This is Holy & Associates, Just Ask Julia sessions. There is a QR code here if you would like to sign up for a future Just Ask Julia session. We do it the first Friday of every month. If you are joining us live, we are going to jump into our Q&A portion. If you are joining us on the replay on YouTube, thanks for watching, and be sure to check us out live for a future session. Thank you.